Elira Voss wiped sweat from her forehead as she walked down the narrow metal corridor of the orbital research station. The hum of machinery filled the air, and the faint smell of oil mixed with recycled air made her stomach turn. Humans like her were low-ranked workers on this station, responsible for cleaning, repairs, and sometimes dangerous jobs that no one else wanted. Most workers kept their heads down. But today something made her pause, a faint scratching sound from a containment corridor marked with warning symbols. She hesitated. A small red light blinked above the reinforced door, signaling a minor alarm. The system usually handled these on its own, but she had learned long ago that alarms often meant something serious had gone wrong. She pressed her hand to the cool metal wall and peeked inside. There it was. A tiny dragon hatchling no bigger than a cat crouched in the corner. Its scales were black with streaks of red, and smoke curled from its nostrils. Its eyes glowed faintly orange, and for a moment Elira froze. Dragons were not pets. They were predators, killers from the first breath, feared across multiple star systems. No one survived being close to a full-grown dragon. But this was a hatchling, and yet, its presence felt dangerous. The hatchling looked at her, head tilting slightly as if studying her. She took a cautious step forward, and it hissed softly, claws scraping the metal floor. Her heart pounded. The containment doors had failed somehow, and this tiny predator was free. She could feel its power even in its small body. Panic rose in her chest. Then it did something she did not expect. The hatchling leapt. Not at her face, not to attack. It jumped onto her back and wrapped its small, scaly legs around her shoulders, holding on tightly. Elira gasped and stumbled, almost hitting the floor. Its weight was small, but its claws dug into her uniform in a way that hurt. She froze. "Get off," she whispered, trying to keep calm. The hatchling did not move. It only curled closer, pressing its warm body against her neck. Its eyes stayed locked on hers, unblinking, intelligent, curious. Alarms started ringing down the corridor. Security systems detected the dragon outside its cell. Red lights flashed along the walls, and a computerized voice shouted, "Containment breach! Containment breach! All personnel proceed to safe zones." Elira took a deep breath, steadying herself. She could not leave the hatchling here. It was small, weak, and alone. She had seen creatures die when abandoned, and she could not let this one die. So she walked forward, slowly, keeping her back straight so the hatchling would not fall. Her every step made her heart race. Other humans passed by, giving her a wide berth. Some froze, staring, but no one dared approach. A dragon on a human's back was not a sight anyone expected to see. Workers whispered in fear. Some called security already. But Elira ignored them. She only focused on moving forward, keeping the hatchling calm. It shifted slightly, pressed its head to her shoulder, and emitted a tiny, almost musical purr. The hatchling seemed exhausted. Its breaths came fast and shallow. Elira could feel its tiny heart beating against her spine. She had never felt something so dangerous, yet so fragile. She knew she had to hide it somewhere until the shift ended. The station's corridors were lined with cameras. The security drones patrolled constantly. One wrong move, and both she and the hatchling would be taken, and possibly destroyed. Humans were expendable, dragons were dangerous. There was no mercy for either. Elira ducked into a maintenance tunnel, out of sight of cameras, and crouched. The hatchling pressed closer, tail flicking nervously. She whispered, "I'm not going to hurt you." Its eyes blinked slowly, a sign she hoped meant it understood. She reached back and offered a small piece of synthetic food she carried in her pocket. The hatchling sniffed, then ate carefully, keeping its legs wrapped around her. She had to continue. The shift was far from over, and leaving the hatchling here alone was impossible. So she stood, adjusted the weight, and began walking again. Each step felt heavy. Every corridor seemed longer than before. Other workers watched her pass, whispering, pointing, but no one stopped her. The station had rules. Breaking them meant trouble. But something inside her told her this small life was worth any punishment. A sudden loud alarm made her freeze. A security drone rounded the corner, sensors scanning. The hatchling hissed quietly but did not move aggressively. Elira kept her body still, holding her breath, hoping the drone's programming would not react to a human carrying a creature. The drone paused, scanning carefully, then moved on. Elira exhaled silently. Hours passed in slow, tense movement. She carried the hatchling through maintenance rooms, ventilation shafts, and empty corridors. Every time someone passed, she prayed they would not see. The hatchling began to relax slightly, its claws loosening, tiny wings twitching with curiosity. It was not attacking. It was not trying to escape. It had chosen her. Alira's mind raced. Why her? Humans were not supposed to be capable of bonding with dragons. The galaxy believed humans were weak, fragile, and easy to overlook. And yet here she was, carrying one of the deadliest predators in existence. Somehow it trusted her. Finally, the end of her shift came into view. The area she cleaned last was near the storage bay. She carefully lowered herself to a hidden corner and let the hatchling rest on a soft crate. Its tiny body huddled there, tail curling around itself. It looked up at her with glowing eyes, silent but aware. Alira knelt beside it, exhausted, heart still racing. She whispered, "You're safe, for now." She knew she could not leave it here forever. But for tonight, the hatchling had survived. And she had survived carrying it. As she stood to leave, she glanced back once. The hatchling raised its small head, eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. It made a soft, almost human-like chirp. Alira's chest tightened. Somehow, without weapons, without authority, without power, a human had carried a predator through its first hours outside the nest, and survived. The corridor lights flickered, and somewhere in the distance, the station's alarm echoed. But for now, the dragon had chosen the wrong species to fear, and that species had chosen to carry it. Alira stepped quietly into the next corridor, careful not to make a sound. The hatchling rested lightly on her shoulders, its tiny claws occasionally scratching her uniform, but it had stopped trying to move. Its breathing was uneven, and the faint glow in its eyes pulsed slowly. She could feel the heat from its small body, the tiny rise and fall of its chest against her back. Carrying it was like carrying fire, alive, unpredictable, and dangerous, but somehow she could not let it go. The corridor was long and winding, lined with vents that hummed with recycled air. Security drones patrolled at intervals, their sensors scanning constantly for anything unusual. A full-grown dragon would trigger alarms instantly. A human carrying one? That was almost unimaginable. Alira moved slowly, adjusting her weight to make sure the hatchling stayed balanced. Every step made her heart pound. She prayed no one would notice her. The hatchling twitched, its tail flicking nervously. It was alive but fragile. Alira knew from experience that small creatures could die easily, especially ones as sensitive as this. She reached for the water dispenser near a maintenance station, offering a tiny sip to the dragon. It sniffed at the water, then licked a few drops carefully, still clinging to her. As she continued, she noticed other workers staring from a distance. Some whispered to each other, pointing at her. She ignored them. Curiosity and fear shone in their eyes, but none dared approach. She realized that carrying a predator dragon through the station had made her invisible and visible at the same time, dangerous to some, fascinating to others. Hours passed slowly. Alira's muscles ached from the weight on her back, and her steps grew heavier. The hatchling had become surprisingly warm and active, its tiny claws pressing into her skin as it adjusted its position. She breathed slowly, focusing on balance, focus, and calm. Every sound echoed too loudly in the quiet corridors, the hum of machines, her own heartbeat, the soft rustle of the hatchling's wings. In one section she had to crawl through a ventilation shaft barely large enough for her body. The hatchling slid slightly but held on tightly, letting out a soft chirp. Alira whispered to it, "Hold on. Almost there." The dragon's glowing eyes met hers briefly, and she felt a strange connection, like it understood her words even without knowing her language. At the end of the shaft, the corridor opened into a storage bay filled with crates and machinery. Here the station was quieter. Few workers passed this way. Alira paused, letting the hatchling stretch lightly on her shoulders. Its wings twitched as it tested them, tiny claws gripping her uniform. She could feel its tiny muscles flexing, sharp but not threatening. Suddenly the hatchling made a small sound, half hiss, half chirp. Alira froze. She realized that other creatures in the area had noticed it. Alien pets, smaller predators, even security droids reacted. Some scuttled away, some froze, sensing danger. She had literally carried death on her shoulders, and it affected everything in its path. Her mind raced. If anyone reported this, security would come immediately. If they came too late, the hatchling might panic and even a small dragon could be deadly. She had to keep moving. She used her body to shield the hatchling from view, ducking behind crates, moving slowly and deliberately. Each step was a careful negotiation with the life she carried. Time blurred. Lunch hour passed, the station lights dimmed slightly, and still she moved. She fed the hatchling small portions of protein paste from her pocket. It accepted them cautiously, eating while clinging to her back. Every now and then it hissed at strange noises, but it did not attack her or anyone else. It had chosen her and she knew it. At one point, a maintenance robot word passed, its sensors glowing. The hatchling stiffened, claws gripping tighter. Alira froze, holding her breath. The robot scanned the corridor, ignored them and moved on. The hatchling relaxed slightly, but Alira felt the weight of the danger all around her. Every step could be her last if she made a mistake. By mid-shift, her muscles burned, but she refused to rest. The hatchling shifted again, tiny wings brushing her neck, its claws digging just enough to remind her it was alive and powerful. Its body was small, but it carried a predator's potential. Humans feared dragons because even a small one could hurt or kill instantly. She could not let fear rule her now. She remembered the stories older workers told of dragons breaking free, of entire corridors destroyed in seconds, of humans never returning. Her own survival depended on careful movement, patience, and the strange bond forming between her and the hatchling. She whispered softly to it, "I won't let anything happen to you. You're safe with me." The hatchling chirped again, almost like an answer. Hours continued. The shift seemed endless, but she finally reached the end of her cleaning route. A quiet maintenance corner offered a small crate and a blanket. Alira lowered herself carefully, placing the hatchling on the soft surface. It uncurled slightly, stretching its tiny limbs, and looked up at her with glowing orange eyes. Alira's body ached, her back and shoulders sore from carrying what the galaxy considered a deadly creature. Yet she felt a strange pride. She had survived and so had it. The bond was fragile but real. Somehow, in carrying death on her shoulders, she had earned its trust. As the station lights flickered and the distant alarms subsided, she realized the truth. This hatchling was not like others. It had chosen her, and she had chosen to carry it, not because of rules or authority, but because of instinct, courage, and empathy. For the first time in her life, Alira understood something the galaxy had forgotten. Strength was not only in power or weapons. Sometimes, strength was quiet, patient, and brave enough to carry something dangerous without harm. And tonight she had carried more than a creature. She had carried life, trust, and a lesson the galaxy would not soon forget. Alira rested for a moment in the quiet maintenance corner, but she knew she could not stay long. The hatchling, small and heavy on her back, shifted as if sensing her hesitation. Its tiny claws dug lightly into her shoulders, and its warm body pressed against her neck. She felt its heartbeat, fast and irregular, but there was no aggression. Somehow, the Predator Dragon had decided she was safe. That in itself was impossible. Dragons were hunters, killers, shaped to attack first and trust never. She stood again, adjusting the hatchling on her back. Every movement was careful. She had learned that sudden motions or loud noises could startle it. But she also learned something else. This hatchling did not bite. It hissed softly sometimes, flicked its tiny tail or stretched its wings, but it never lashed out. Its claws were sharp, but they dug in more for balance than for attack. Alira marveled at the creature. It was a predator, yes, but it had chosen her. And that choice carried weight she did not fully understand. As she walked through the facility, cameras flickered on and off, sensors scanned, and drones hovered near the ceilings. She ducked into shadows, keeping herself and the hatchling hidden. Every step felt heavier than the last. Her body ached from carrying the small yet deadly creature. But the weight was not just physical. She carried responsibility for life, for trust, for a being the galaxy had always feared. Other workers stared at her from a distance. Whispers traveled down the corridors like ripples in water. "Did you see that?" one said. "She's carrying a dragon on her back." Another shook their head, eyes wide. No one approached. Fear kept them distant, but curiosity followed her. Humans were low-ranked here, but somehow she had earned attention without even trying. She ignored them. The hatchling's safety was her only concern. As the shift continued, she passed through the laboratory wing. Scientists in white coats worked at glass panels, monitoring experiments. Some of them froze when they saw her. Their eyes widened at the sight of a human carrying a dragon. Alarms in their minds screamed warnings, but they did not move. The hatchling's behavior was unusual. Instead of attacking or panicking, it stayed still, almost calm, clinging to her back. Alira felt a strange sense of relief. Perhaps they were noticing what she had noticed. This was not an ordinary predator. The hatchling made a small chirping sound and turned its glowing eyes toward her. Alira reached up and touched its head lightly. It leaned into her hand, a small gesture that seemed almost impossible. She whispered, "You trust me." Its eyes blinked slowly and she knew it understood, even if not fully. For the first time she saw a predator act like something more than instinct. It was thinking. It was choosing. They moved together, slowly and carefully, past rows of containment units holding other dangerous creatures. Normally, A dragon in this corridor would have triggered panic. Alarms would scream. Security would rush in. But this one did not. Somehow the hatchling's calmness seemed contagious. Workers glanced, stepped back, but no attacks happened. The dragon's presence alone demanded attention, yet it offered none of the violence expected. Hours passed. Elira's body ached more with each step. Her back burned, her legs felt like lead, and her shoulders throbbed from the constant grip of tiny claws. Yet she could not stop. The hatchling depended on her, and she depended on it too. She had carried it through the first dangers of the facility, through alarms, drones, and fear. She had learned how to move carefully, how to adjust to its weight, how to communicate in ways neither of them fully understood. At one point, a security drone rounded a corner. Its sensors glowed, scanning the area. The hatchling twitched slightly, claws gripping tighter. Elira froze, holding her breath. The drone hovered, then scanned again and finally moved on. Relief washed over her. The hatchling exhaled a small hiss and Elira whispered, "See?" Nothing happened. It responded with a small chirp, almost like a laugh. The bond between them grew stronger with each passing hour. The hatchling moved its tiny head, watching her face, reacting to her voice and gestures. Elira realized she could almost predict its movements. When she slowed, it relaxed. When she spoke softly, it blinked slowly, calm. When danger appeared, it tightened its grip but did not strike. It was learning trust and she was learning patience. By the time she reached the far end of the facility, near a quiet storage area, exhaustion threatened to overtake her. The hatchling's small body weighed more than it should, but it did not complain. Its tiny wings fluttered occasionally, testing the air, its tail curling around her neck. She felt a strange warmth, a connection deeper than fear or survival. Finally, she found a corner behind a stack of crates. She lowered herself gently, letting the hatchling step down. It crouched there, looking up at her with glowing eyes. Elira's arms trembled as she rubbed her shoulders, sore from the effort. She looked at the hatchling and whispered, "We made it, for now." The creature chirped softly, a sound that seemed almost gentle. Elira realized that something incredible had happened. This predator, feared across galaxies for its strength and instinct to kill, had chosen a human. And that human had carried it without harm, without fear controlling her actions. The realization made her chest swell. Somewhere in the distant corridors, alarms continued to hum faintly. Workers whispered. Drones passed. But in that quiet corner, a predator dragon had stopped being just a weapon or a threat. It had become a companion, fragile yet deadly, trusting and alive. And Elira knew that the galaxy would never expect what had just happened. She stayed with it, quietly, learning its breathing, its small movements, its tiny claws that dug just enough to remind her of its strength. She had survived the impossible. The predator that was supposed to bite, to kill, to strike, had not. And in that moment, she understood something the galaxy had forgotten. Even the deadliest creatures could choose differently. Even predators could trust. And humans, even those unseen and underestimated, could carry the impossible on their shoulders. Elira moved carefully through the quieter corridors of the station, the hatchling resting lightly on her back. Its claws dug just enough to remind her of its presence, but it had stopped twitching nervously. The small dragon's orange eyes glowed faintly in the dim light, scanning everything around them. She felt its awareness, its instincts, and somehow its trust. She had carried it this far, and now the real test was coming. The facility was not as empty as she had hoped. Workers and scientists whispered in the halls, pointing at her. Many had never seen a dragon outside its containment, let alone one calmly riding a human's back. Some stopped, stared, and then stepped aside. Others pulled out communication devices, reporting the impossible. A predator dragon had chosen a human, and she carried it unscathed. The whispers grew louder. By mid-shift, security officers and station supervisors had been alerted. Cameras tracked her every step, and the dragon's glow made it impossible to hide. Elira knew she could not outrun attention forever. She felt eyes on her from every direction. Curiosity, fear, disbelief. The galaxy was watching, even if silently. The hatchling shifted slightly, tail flicking as a new sound echoed down the corridor. Security drones rounded the corner, sensors glowing red. Elira froze. The small dragon hissed, but not aggressively. Its claws tightened lightly on her shoulders, and for a moment she feared it might panic. Instead it stayed calm, almost obedient. The drones scanned her and the hatchling paused and then hovered aside. The sensors recorded, the lights flashed, but the hatchling did not act violently. Elira exhaled slowly, relief washing through her. She realized that the creature was learning from her patience. from her careful movements, from the calm she projected. The Predator had chosen differently. Word of her unusual companion spread beyond the station corridors. Scientists and supervisors debated. Some were skeptical, claiming the sensors were malfunctioning. Others insisted on observing the phenomenon. Elira could hear hushed voices. It is impossible. No dragon chooses a human. But look at it, calm, passive, it trusts her. The small dragon had become the center of attention not because of threat but because of choice. By the end of the shift, Elira had moved the hatchling through the farthest wings of the station. Its small body clung to her back as she rested briefly behind a stack of crates. She rubbed her shoulders, exhausted from carrying the living weight of a predator that could have killed her in an instant. But the dragon had not bitten, not even once. It had followed her, and in doing so, it had shown a level of intelligence and trust no one expected. Then came the arrival of the first outside observers. Representatives from nearby dragon clans, brought in through emergency communication protocols, appeared in the station's observation deck. Their presence sent a ripple of tension through the corridors. Dragons were not creatures of peace. They were apex predators, proud and unforgiving. And they had been told one thing: a human should never carry their young alive. Elira sensed their presence before she saw them. The hatchling stiffened, claws digging in lightly, tail flicking nervously. Its body glowed faintly, signaling awareness of higher intelligence nearby. Elira whispered softly, "It's okay. We'll be careful." She adjusted the small dragon's position, making sure it felt secure. The hatchling relaxed slightly, but did not stop watching the approaching observers. The observers, towering dragons with scales of silver and black, studied the hatchling first, then looked at Elira. Their eyes were sharp, critical, and full of suspicion. Yet no immediate attack came. The hatchling remained calm, its small body pressed against the human, glowing softly in the dim light. The observers had expected panic, resistance, even hostility. But there was none. Elira felt the weight of their gaze, heavier than any security drone, heavier than the hatchling itself. She did not flinch. She stood straight, careful not to make sudden movements. The hatchling chirped softly, almost reassuringly. She realized that the tiny dragon had chosen this human for more than protection. It had chosen her because she remained steady, patient, and brave when every instinct in the universe said to run. Conversations began in low growls and clicks among the observers. One elder stepped forward, silver scales catching the light. Its voice resonated in Elira's mind, not words she understood fully, but intention clear. "Why does this human survive with one of us alive? Why is the predator calm?" Elira remained silent, letting the hatchling's behavior speak. Its calmness, trust, and obedience were proof enough. The elders circled, assessing, calculating, and realizing something extraordinary. This hatchling was not violent. It was learning trust. It had chosen to bond with a human. The station staff watched in awe. Humans were often dismissed as weak, expendable, and unimportant. Yet here one human had carried a dragon through the station without harm, without fear controlling her actions, and without violence. That was strength the galaxy rarely recognized, a quiet, persistent strength, the kind that endured danger and earned trust rather than commanding it. By the end of the observation, the elders stepped back, their gaze lingering on both the human and the hatchling. Their verdict was unspoken but clear. This event was unprecedented. This human was extraordinary. And the hatchling was alive because it had trusted her. Elira finally found a hidden corner to rest, lowering the hatchling gently to the floor. It stretched its small limbs, wings twitching, tail curling around her feet. It looked at her with glowing eyes, soft and trusting. She rubbed its head lightly. "We made it," she whispered. "The galaxy noticed, but we're still safe, for now." As the station lights dimmed and distant alarms continued to hum faintly, Elira realized that she and the hatchling had done something remarkable. A predator dragon had chosen a human. And a human had carried it, unarmed, unafraid, and unbroken. In the quiet of the observation deck, she felt a strange pride. She had survived the impossible. The galaxy had noticed. And perhaps for the first time humans were seen as more than weak, expendable observers. The hatchling chirped softly, a sound that seemed almost like approval. Elira smiled, exhausted but proud. She had carried death on her shoulders. She had survived attention, fear, and suspicion. And together, she and the hatchling had shown the galaxy something it had long forgotten. That even the smallest human could endure, influence, and inspire the creatures the universe feared most. Elira sat quietly in the hidden corner of the station, the hatchling resting lightly on her lap. Its tiny claws tapped softly against her uniform, tail curling and uncurling as it explored the space around them. The creature had grown slightly since the shift began, but it remained small, fragile, and dependent. Yet, it carried the same strength and intelligence that had made it a feared predator in the galaxy. And now, for the first time, it trusted a human completely. The observation drones from the elders had left, but word of the unusual event spread across the station like fire. Scientists, workers, and even distant stations in the sector were sending reports, messages, and inquiries. A human had carried a predator dragon safely, without fear, without weapons, and without aggression. The galaxy had noticed, and the implications were extraordinary. Alira stroked the hatchling's head gently. "You're safe now," she whispered. Its glowing eyes blinked slowly, softening in response. Somehow she felt a deeper connection than she had ever felt with any creature, human or otherwise. The hatchling was not violent because she had not been violent. It had not feared her because she had chosen patience over panic. And in that, a quiet lesson spread silently. Humans were more than weak observers. They could endure, influence, and even inspire. As she moved through the station to complete the rest of her shift, the hatchling stayed with her, calm and alert. Workers parted as she passed, some in awe, some in disbelief. Security officers no longer followed closely, unsure of how to handle the unprecedented situation. And in every corner, whispers carried the same sentiment. Humans had survived something that should have destroyed them. By the end of the shift, Alira found herself at the station's edge, near the shuttle bay. The hatchling, curious but cautious, explored the floor briefly before climbing back onto her shoulders. She adjusted it gently, feeling its tiny heartbeat against her spine. 4 hours she had carried it through fear, suspicion, and exhaustion. Now she carried it toward a new understanding, not just for her but for the galaxy. The elders' representatives returned quietly, observing from a distance. Their silver and black scales reflected the lights of the station, but they did not approach. Instead, they watched as Alira and the hatchling moved calmly. Something in their presence had changed. They had expected resistance, aggression, maybe even panic. Instead, they saw cooperation, trust, and endurance. Alira knew they were learning. The galaxy had long believed that dragons were shaped only by strength and violence, that humans were shaped only by fear and weakness. But here, in this quiet moment, something different had happened. The hatchling had survived. She had survived. And together, they had shown what the universe had forgotten, that strength could take many forms and that patience, courage, and empathy could be as powerful as claws or fire. She found a quiet shuttle storage room and lowered the hatchling gently. It crouched, wings twitching, tail curling around itself. Its eyes followed hers, glowing softly in the dim light. She whispered again, "You made it. We made it. And now, maybe the galaxy will remember us differently." A subtle chirp came from the hatchling, a sound that seemed almost like laughter. Alira smiled, exhausted but relieved. The station lights flickered overhead, and for the first time she allowed herself to feel a small pride. She had carried life on her shoulders, but she had also carried hope, endurance, and a quiet challenge to the galaxy's assumptions. In the days that followed, the hatchling remained by her side, learning, growing, and observing the humans around it. Scientists took notes, not to experiment on it, but to understand how such a dangerous species could bond with a human so quickly. Other species began to question their assumptions as well. If a predator dragon could choose a human, what did that say about the species the galaxy had long dismissed? Alira continued her work quietly, but she was no longer invisible. Her courage had created attention, but it had also created respect. The hatchling, once a creature of fear and potential destruction, had become a symbol, not of domination but of endurance and choice. She realized that humans, often overlooked, carried more than bodies. They carried intelligence, patience, and empathy. And sometimes, carrying something small and dangerous could change perceptions forever. One quiet evening, she sat with the hatchling on her shoulders, watching the stars through the station's observation window. The galaxy stretched endlessly, full of predators, wars, and danger. But here, in this tiny corner, humans had survived the impossible. They had carried the unthinkable and lived to teach the galaxy a lesson it had long forgotten. Strength was not always in weapons or power. Sometimes, it was in patience, courage, and the quiet endurance to protect life, even at great personal risk. The hatchling chirped softly, nudging her cheek. Alira smiled and stroked its small head. "You trusted me," she said. "And I trusted you. That's how we survived." The small dragon blinked slowly, wings twitching slightly. Its choice had been made and so had hers. Together they had carried more than a predator. They had carried understanding, trust, and a reminder that humans could be more than the galaxy assumed. News slowly spread beyond the station. Other species observed humans differently, realizing that patience, courage, and endurance could shape relationships even with the deadliest creatures. Humans were no longer just weak, expendable workers in the eyes of those who had watched. They were beings capable of quiet, enduring strength. Elira and the hatchling became inseparable, not because of rules or rewards, but because of choice and trust. The galaxy watched, and in watching it began to learn something new. Humans did not conquer predators with weapons. They endured them. They carried them. And sometimes, without even realizing it, they changed the universe forever. As the hatchling curled against her neck one last time before sleep, Elira felt warmth she had never known. She had carried death on her shoulders, survived suspicion and danger, and in the process, carried hope for her species. The predator had not bitten, had not attacked. It had trusted, and in that trust humans found their place, not as weak observers but as carriers of life, endurance, and quiet strength the galaxy could no longer ignore. And for the first time she knew that even in the vast, dangerous galaxy, a single human could make a difference.